Hey guys, Shot Guy Picks here. Hope everyone's doing well, having a great week. We're going to be breaking down Dana White's Contender Series Week 8. We're going to be going over every single fight in the card, the best bets, what fights to avoid, possible round props, as well as any possible parlays. We're coming off the hottest week of my life. We placed number 6 out of 1,084 on Tapology for Week 7 on Dana White Contender Series with 3 perfect fights where I predicted the fighter, the method of victory, and the round it happened, including a plus 200 dog in Frunze. Apparently, I paid off someone's rent. On UFC, although I didn't have enough time to post a video, I did post on my Instagram stories, and we went 12 for 14 on the Paris card. We placed 184 out of 5,294. I'm feeling really good about that. And it would have been higher if I stuck to my gut with Gomi by decision, even though he definitely did not deserve that. If you're new here, welcome. I appreciate the support. I, of course, want to continue that run, improve that the 71% on my titles aren't clickbait. We really do kill it with UFC. This week's card on Dana White Contender Series features 2 chalky fights and the others are relatively coin flips. We also got Torrez Finney returning for his 3rd time, his 2nd time of the season where he fought back in August. That's very interesting. But with that being said, let's kill it again with this card as well. Let's get into it. For the first fight on the card, we got Christien Xavier versus Jacobe. Xavier's 10-1-1, where he is 3-1-1 in his last 5 fights. He's 32 years old and 5'11". That's basically all we got from Tapology. And Smith is 8-0, where he's 28 years old, 6'2". This fight is a clear setup for the wrestling juggernaut in Jacobe Smith to honestly show his abilities. Smith is an all-American wrestler with crazy athleticism and raw power, while Xavier is a wild, unskilled brawler with no wrestling defense to speak of, truly. Smith is an incredibly talented wrestler with a background at Oklahoma State. His wrestling is relentless, chaining together takedowns and maintaining control throughout the fight. His striking is still developing, but he has shown progress in using straight punches and his natural power to hurt his opponents. Smith's cardio is also very impressive, allowing him to push the pace really for the full 15 minutes. Xavier is a brawler who relies on the overhand strikes and power shots with very technical skill. Truthfully, he has no wrestling at all, and his wild style leaves him very vulnerable to counters and takedowns. Xavier's only real path to victory here is landing a lucky punch on Smith. But, even that is probably a long shot. Smith's wrestling and athleticism should be far too much for Xavier, who lacks the skill in wrestling defense, truthfully, to stop Smith's takedowns or even deal with his power. There's a reason why this guy is negative 600. Smith, round 1 knockout, in my opinion. I think he's going to easily dominate this. Like I said, I think this is a very easy layup for Jacobe Smith. I think they're just they just want this guy to pull through. At the end of the day, he's 28. He's young. He's 6'2". But this is a clear layup for Smith. He's definitely going to knock him out. Whether it's round 1 or round 2 is the question. I'm going round 1. I wouldn't be surprised with round 2. But I'm going with round 1, knockout Smith. Up next on the card, we got Abdellah Er-Ramy versus Torrez Finney. Er-Ramy 7-1, 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He's 28 years old, 6'0". Other than that, we basically don't get any other stats on Tapology. Torrez Finney's 9-0, 5-0 in his last 5 fights. 25 years old, 5'8", 75.5-inch reach. This fight features 2 aggressive brawling fighters with questionable skill sets and cardio. Both Er-Ramy and Finney are known for their wild and unrefined striking, but their approaches differ slightly. Finney is coming off a very disappointing Dana White Contender Series performance where he truthfully seemed to really regress. In his first fight in Dana White Contender Series, he kind of deserved the contract, but I can understand why he didn't get it. In this second fight, he definitely did not deserve the contract, but nonetheless, he won both fights. He primarily is the type to be relying on his physicality and his wrestling. He's the type of person who really he gets hit a lot and somehow finds the takedown, so to say. He doesn't he kind of allows himself to get hit because he's looking for that takedown. He's kind of small as well for the division. Er-Ramy is a reckless striker who leaves himself exposed, but he has shown more versatility in his attacks. Er-Ramy is a wild, powerful striker who looks to overwhelm his opponents by walking them down and throwing bombs. He mixes up his strikes with body shots and uppercuts, but his reckless style often leaves him out of position and vulnerable to counters. While he hits hard, his defense is very questionable and he has been dropped in previous fights due to his wild exchanges. Finney is a smaller fighter who relies on his wrestling, like we mentioned, and his physicality to bail himself out of trouble, which he very much finds himself in a lot, particularly against less skilled opponents. His striking is unrefined, and he often throws wild hooks while flailing his arms in hopes to land a power shot, which, he probably and very much does not land. Finney's wrestling could be an advantage here, which, truthfully, that's really all he has. But his lack of commitment to it, as seen on the Dana White Contender Series, raises questions. His cardio is also suspect, making him vulnerable in longer fights. So basically what it is that, he really just relies on wrestling, but in his last 2 fights, he's being told that he can't just wrestle. He's being told, like, listen, bro, you want a contract? You can't just do that dumb shit because you're being very much boring. And you're negative 600, and you're negative 1,000, Here, he's negative 200, and it's going to be very much different. And we're going to have to assume that he's gonna want to brawl with him again. Both fighters are wild brawlers, but Er-Ramy's slightly better striking versatility and power could give him an edge. Finney's wrestling may help him control Er-Ramy, but he abandons that game plan a couple of times. He could get caught in a wild exchange. Ultimately, given Er-Ramy's holes in his defense and Finney's low-key power and a quick knockout could be very possible here, assuming Finney avoids prolonged striking exchanges. I think Finney really needs to prove us something here. And I think given that they're giving him, this is his 3rd time and this is his 2nd time in 1 month, he really needs to show us something if he wants to get that contract. There's no way, if he doesn't get the contract, there's no way he's going to return. There's just no way, right? As a bettor, Finney's the way. At negative 200, you have to take it. Finney doesn't lose, let's be honest. He just doesn't. So take that negative 200, add that in the 3-legger, but he really needs to impress us here. Give me round 1 Finney knockout, and I'm not too confident in it. But Finney will for sure win here, in my opinion. Up next on the card, we got David Martinez versus Xavier Franklin. David Martinez is 10-1, where he's 5-0 his last 5 fights. He's 26 years old, 5'5". Meanwhile, Xavier Franklin is 5-0, and we really don't have much stats on him, but he is 5'6". This clash of styles between a slick, patient kickboxer in Martinez and the more explosive but very much less refined in the 5-0 Xavier Franklin. Martinez is a highly skilled striker with a patient technical approach, while Franklin is a powerful but very, very green athlete who prefers to brawl and use his athleticism to overwhelm his opponents. Martinez is very composed. He likes to pick his shots, uses his footwork to frustrate his opponents. He has a very solid jab. He mixes up his striking very well and uses a variety of kicks to control a range. His defense is sound, and he has excellent movement, often luring his opponents into his counters. Martinez's biggest weakness is his low volume, which could allow his opponents to outpoint him. His striking is not technical whatsoever, but he hits very hard, and he is relentless when closing the distance. Franklin is less effective at range when his striking looks limited, but up close, he throws wild hooks and overhands that can very much overwhelm less disciplined fighters. While he has some grappling ability, he rarely wrestles, and his ground game is not likely to be a factor in this fight whatsoever. Martinez's technical striking and footwork should very much allow him to dictate the pace in this fight and frustrate Franklin, who relies on closing the distance to land his power shots. If Franklin can force Martinez into a brawl, things could get very much interesting, but Martinez's skill should very much give him the edge here. I think Franklin is too green here. Give me Martinez round 2 knockout. I think he's just far superior in the striking. I think it'll very much allow him to pick apart Franklin at range, eventually landing a big blow on him and very much getting Franklin frustrated here, where he ends up knocking him out in the 2nd round. Give me Martinez round 2 knockout. Up next on the card, we got Alberto Montes versus Carlos Calderon. Montes is 9-1, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's 30 years old, 5'7". Meanwhile, Calderon is 6-2, 3-2 in his last 5 fights, 28 years old, 5'10". This fight features 2 very low-level BJJ specialists who rely on their opponents to make mistakes rather than initiating offense. Both Montes and Calderon have questionable striking skills and cardio, making this a contest likely to be cited by a submission scramble or a positional mistake. Montes is primarily a front choke specialist, relying heavily on a Darce and Anaconda chokes to finish opponents. His striking is very limited, but he does use kicks well to control distance. Montes has very poor boxing and doesn't like to be pressured, but he is dangerous if opponents shoot on him very recklessly, often catching them with his signature submissions. Calderon is a wild striker with very poor defense, leaving his chin very high in exchanges and often rushing forward without any game plan. His grappling is also dependent on submissions from his back, as he tends to throw up wild submission attempts rather than working for control or position. Calderon's cardio is very suspect, and he fades very quickly after the first round. Montes is likely to find success in this fight if Calderon shoots in recklessly or leaves his neck exposed during his scrambles. Neither fighter is likely to dominate on this feet at all. Let's be honest. But Montes has shown better range controlling with his kicks. I expect Montes to capitalize on a sloppy takedown or positional error by Calderon, securing a submission. Ultimately, I think this is going to be one of those fights that it's not going to be too fun to watch. I think it's just going to be a bunch of scrambling and not high IQ striking. But you kind of have to go with the guy who's 9-1 versus the guy who's 6-2 and 3-2 in his last 5 fights, right? Give me Montes round 1, possibly round 2 submission. I got to go with submission for sure here. I don't think this fight sees the judges. Give me Montes by submission. Up next on the card, we got the main event of Diyar Nurgozhay versus Bartosz Szewczyk. Nurgozhay is 9-0. He's 6'2". Meanwhile, Szewczyk is 8-2-1 and 6'4" with a 77.2-inch reach. This is an intriguing matchup between very, underwhelming fighters. Diyar enters this fight with a reputation from his time outside the UFC, but his performances have been very lackluster with a weak resume and some glaring cardio issues. Szewczyk, while not having an impressive record, presents himself as a cleaner, more technical striker, though he also struggles with output and a passive fighting style. This makes for a very weird choice for a main event, with questions about each fighter's ability to push the pace and capitalize on their opponent's weaknesses. I think this is going to be a boring fight, is basically what I'm trying to say to you. Nurgozhay's strengths lie in his wrestling and top control. He is strong in scrambles and has solid defense on the mat, but his wrestling has been inconsistent and his opponents have found success taking him down. His striking is very limited and his cardio is a major concern here, as he tends to slow down dramatically after basically above 1.5 rounds, so around 8, 9, 10 minutes. Nurgozhay is known for gassing out and becoming much less active both on the feet and grappling. While he is strong early in the rounds, his low output and tendencies to gas himself out make him vulnerable as the fight progresses. Szewczyk is a more comfortable striker than Nurgozhay, with cleaner technique and the ability to put out decent, and I mean decent volume. However, he has a tendency to remain in first gear and doesn't push the pace. Basically, what I'm saying to you is he's kind of pussy, which often leads him falling behind on points or being involved in split decisions and or draws, which he really should not be in. He has shown decent wrestling skills with a solid sprawl and good scrambling ability, which might help him fend off Nurgozhay's takedown attempts. His issue is lack of urgency. He kind of just looks fucking stupid in there sometimes. You ever been in a situation where you had money on a fighter and you're just like screaming, hoping that the coach was screaming at that fighter like, bro, you have 40 seconds left. Like, why are you not punching him? Why are you not going for the finish? But while Nurgozhay has the wrestling and strength advantage, his cardio issues and limited striking very much could be his downfall here, in my opinion, especially if Szewczyk can defend the early takedowns and make him work for it. Szewczyk's striking output and technical advantage on the feet should allow him to outpoint Nurgozhay, especially if the fight drags into the later rounds, where Nurgozhay tends to fade. In my opinion, I think Nurgozhay he slows down way too much, in my opinion. Szewczyk's consistent output and technical striking will likely pay off, in my opinion. I ultimately think someone gets knocked out here. I think this fight definitely does not see the judges, and so therefore, if I have to pick a round for me to think that Szewczyk is going to knock him out, it's going to be round 3. It's going to have to be round 3, because that's when Nurgozhay is the weakest, basically. Give me Szewczyk round 3 knockout. Give me Szewczyk, round 3 knockout. That's it for us here. Those are my breakdowns for Dana White Contender Series Week 8. Do let me know who you guys got in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? As always, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, as these videos do take me a lot of time to make. If they happen to help you out, it would be a great way to show me some support. I love it when people show me that they're making money off my picks. This week, apparently, I made a lot of people some money. And so let's keep that rolling, right? You know, in my opinion, I'm really thrilled as to how well the channel has been doing in only just about 2.5 months. Again, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, stay up.